I conducted surveillance of her for a while after she dumped me, and I called it surveillance because stalking is a felony. And I found out that she was dating some French guy, some guy named Fiancé. So I can take a hint. And then I dated a woman from the circus. She was the sword swallower. Don't get ahead of me. She used to call me her little pocket knife, and that hurt. I'm not going to lie to you.
Welcome, everyone, to the Rosie and Bill Show. Our guest this week has been headlining America's top comedy clubs for years, and the title of his recent special, Rapid Fire, sums up his career and his comedy act perfectly. Please welcome to the Rosie and Bill Show, the top human finisher on Season 7 of America's Got Talent, Tom Cotter. Tom, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. Welcome back, Cotter. Thank you for having me on, even though it's the first time.
It's our pleasure. Tom, we saw you in July perform. It was the first time live. And I'll tell you, the first thing that came to my mind that I said to Bill, Johnny Carson. How often do you get that reference for your stand-up?
I've heard it before. So I don't try to do a Carson impression. I just think we were both kind of short white guys, and so people make that connection. But I loved him. I revered him. When I was a good kid, which was very rare as a child, my parents would let me stay up and watch The Tonight Show. They'd let me watch the monologue. And depending on how many cocktails my parents had, I may be able to stay to the end of the show. And the comedian was always the third guest. So I always stuck if I could see Buddy Hackett or Carlin or somebody like that on The Tonight Show, I was just thrilled. I was over the moon. So, I've always revered Johnny Carson, and anyone that wants to compare me to him, I will take that as a badge of honor because he is one of the greats, of course, of all time. Absolutely.
And, it's your dry sense of humor, your delivery, understated, and the quick punchlines that Bill was talking about. And I'll tell you, you got to get on the ride with you because you don't dumb it down, and you got to keep up, because you keep going. You don't wait.
Yeah. I think I'm ADD. When I was a kid, we didn't have ADD. When I was a kid, ADD was the opposite of subtract. But we had hyper. He's hyper. So they used to say, Tom's hyper. And I was hyper. I would play kick the can all the way to school, which is half a mile with a garbage can. And then once I got there, my teachers would make me go clap the erasers. I don't know if any of your viewers are from that era, but you used to go have to clap the erasers. We had these things called chalkboards. They don't have those anymore. But I was always the victim who had to do that because I was so fidgety in my seat. I had restless leg syndrome before it was even diagnosed. And my comedy is kind of the same way. I'm a kind of a setup, punchline, tagline guy. So it's not just traditional stand-up as setup and punchline. I tag a joke to death ad nauseum. And that's just the way my style has always been. It's a style that goes back to vaudeville. It's called misdirection, and I love doing it. It's kind of a puzzle piece, a Rubik's Cube, trying to put it all together. It's a bunch of one-liners sewn together. And so people take that away from me. And I was just in Paris for 2 weeks for the Olympics. And you say I don't have to dumb it down. Well, I'm not disparaging the French. They're certainly not dumb, but there was a language barrier. So I did have to slow down quite significantly there so that they could get my inferences and my kind of what I was going for.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate each and every one of you. And we also appreciate our first and longest running sponsor of the show, Tom and his team of insurance professionals at the Malin Agency. If world-class customer service and doing business with someone you can trust is important to you, give Tom and his team a call today for all your insurance needs. Tom, I have to tell you, Tom, and it's interesting that you said you slowed it down there, because one of the things that I was going to do was maybe give a little bit of a public service announcement for people coming to your shows, because I have to admit, there were times when we saw you at the Keswick where I was almost afraid to laugh because I figured if I laugh, I'm going to miss two more punchlines. So I'm going to have to come back. So my public service announcement is don't just go see Tom once. If he's in your area for more than one show, go multiple times because you're going to hear a joke you missed while you were laughing. Promise.
That's it. I don't wait. I'm into the next punchline. If you didn't get the last one, you snooze, you lose. We're already on to the next one. And I think that's born out of insecurity. I hate lulls. My wife is a stand-up comic and she's a storyteller. So she'll get up there and spend 5 minutes rearranging the microphone stand and the stool before she gets to a joke. And then I'm pulling my hair out in the back of the room going, say something. But she kills because she's like a slow storyteller and lets the audience come to her, whereas I am a rapid fire kind of guy and I just rattle off one-liners.
Yeah, and some of your jokes are time released too, I noticed. You know,
Yeah.
2 or 3 days later, you burst out laughing for no apparent reason.
I love it when people say they got some of my stuff on the ride home that they didn't catch when they were there. And, you know, people say I'll slap the dashboard of my car and go, oh, now I. So, yeah, it's kind of a puzzle piece. It's fun to put together. And there are other people that do it. Wendy Liedman is very similar, her style. There's a guy named Don Gavin out of Boston that people, if they have a moment, they should Google. He's one of the legends. And he's the guy I always looked up to, Brian Kiley. There are a few of us that do it. It's an old style, but it's a fun style.
Well, I'll tell you, we had such a great time, and we're going to get back to you and your wife as comics in a little bit. But first, I just want to ask you, because you were a comic a long time before you got on season 7 of America's Got Talent. When did you realize that you could make people laugh?
Well, I'm the youngest of 6 kids, and when you're the youngest in a family, you do whatever you can to get attention because your parents are like, been there, done that, bought the T-shirt. So, my oldest sister, she's the oldest sibling I have. There are 5 or 6 photo albums from every year of her life. I'm lucky if I make a cameo in one of those, so their interest declined as the kids came spouting out. And so when I was the youngest of 6, I just wanted to make everybody laugh just to notice me. So my parents would begrudgingly snicker at some of my inappropriate jokes at the dinner table, but I liked making my siblings laugh. And then I liked making kids at school laugh. I was kind of the typical class clown. So many of us, and my wife is the youngest in her family. I haven't done a formal study, but I believe that many comedians are the youngest in their family because they need attention. And so we do whatever we can. And what used to get me sent to the principal's office now gets me compensated. So it's a great country we live in, I would say.
That's a great way to look at it, Tom. Now, when you were younger, and obviously you just talked about how, you used your comedy to get attention, but was there ever a time when you thought about maybe a career other than comedy?
Oh yeah, I was tunnel vision for the first maybe 18 years of my life. I definitely wanted to be a lawyer. My dad was a doctor. He didn't like lawyers because lawyers tend to sue doctors, but he had so many friends that were lawyers. And so they would come over to the house and I was intrigued by them. And then I became fascinated by political science. I was a political science major, but I was pre-law. So I was a cop. That was my first job, was a cop on Nantucket. Not a lot of crime on Nantucket, by the way. Moped accident is a big day. So I was that, and then I followed around a judge for a while. I clerked for a judge, and then I worked for a lawyer in Rhode Island, carrying around his briefcase. And, I was definitely going to go to law school, and I told my dad that I would take the LSAT and start applying when I graduated college, but I just wanted to get this comedy thing out of my system, and it unfortunately is terminal, and it never left my system. So that was the career path that I deviated from.
Was he supportive of that?
My dad is a World War II, well, God rest his soul, he's no longer with us, but he was a World War II guy, and he was a child of the Depression. So he couldn't fathom that someone would make a living, telling jokes, especially after he put 6 kids through private school and college. He spent a lot of money on our education. And so it was probably somewhat deflating to have his youngest child say, bad investment, Dad, because I'm going to go tell jokes to drunks in basements at 1 a.m. But he came aboard. When my first maybe 5 or 6 years, the only things I ever did on TV were on MTV, which is not his he's not the target demographic for MTV as a World War II veteran. And then the Comedy Channel, which became part of, merged with Comedy Central. He couldn't identify with that. And he'd go golf with his buddies and they'd talk about their son who was a Wall Street guy, or their son who's a professor or a doctor or a lawyer. And so my dad was like, I don't know what's going on with Tom. And then when I finally did the Tonight Show, that was something he could relate to, because we all, again, we admired Johnny Carson immensely in our house. And unfortunately, I didn't get on before Johnny passed, but I got on when Leno was on there, and my dad liked Leno. He was a Boston guy, and we're New England people. So finally, at that point, my dad was like, well, maybe he's not a complete useless child. So that got him on my side. And when I did AGT, that was towards the end of his stay on the planet. He lived till 98, so he had a great run. We celebrate him, not we're not mourning him, but he came to those shows, and you can't help be blown away by that size of that audience and everything about it. So I think he realized then that I wasn't completely useless. How about that?
No, I'm sure that he was like, wow, he's got this audience in the palm of his hand, because you were amazing on that show. We watched a lot of those clips and everything. Tom, what would you say was maybe some of the hardest lessons you've learned as a comic?
Well, you have to be Teflon, and I have to walk my wife off the ledge all the time, and she walks me off the ledge. Sometimes you're going to have a difficult show, and sometimes it's not you. Sometimes it is you, but sometimes the lighting is bad, the sound is bad, the audience isn't seated properly. I do these corporate gigs all the time, and we fight with them. And they say, we want you to go on when they get served dinner. Well, nobody laughs with a mouthful of prime rib or lobster tail. I've been doing this for 40 years. And I tell them, you cannot serve dinner when you want people to laugh. It's not going to happen. Sometimes you leave a gig and you're like, wow, that was kind of rough. But you just have to dust it off and get back in the saddle, because 9 out of 10 times you're going to have a great show and it's going to be wonderful, especially if you've been at it for a long time. That's a tough lesson to learn, is that they're just not all going to be great. Even Seinfeld goes to some of these gigs now. Even he's complaining, and he goes home and sleeps on a mountain of cash every day. So he's complaining. But sometimes lately he's been dealing with people who don't agree with him politically about the Israel-Palestinian thing. He's been heckled. And even before that, he's not an arch conservative or anything, but people show up at his shows and they his quote, I think, to the New York Times was that he will never do a college again, because these kids show up waiting for you to utter that one thing that's going to trigger them, and then they go on social media and eviscerate you. And that's what we came out of the pandemic. We couldn't work during the pandemic, which was brutal. We were non-essential. That's what they kept saying. You're non-essential. My mother-in-law prefers the term useless, but either way, we weren't allowed to work. And so we came out of the pandemic chomping at the bit. We wanted to get back to work and back in front of a live audience. And the first thing we come back to is this woke thing where everybody is triggered by everything. And so that's been the most recent challenge, is having to, you have to really be careful, and you're walking on thin ice, whereas before you didn't have to. Comedy is about mocking and lampooning. And when you take that out of the equation, then it kind of loses a lot of its fun. And Seinfeld felt the same way. And that's my most recent challenge that we're all dealing with, not just me.
Right. And before the pandemic, I remember seeing Seinfeld interviewed, where he went that year that he went back on the road to kind of hone new material. And they were showing video of people talking while he was doing his stand-up. And he finally said, how big do you have to be for people to not do that? And it just doesn't matter.
Yeah. Some people just don't know how to behave in public. It's sad, but you do these, and alcohol has a lot to do with that, but you do these gigs, and the later in the night it goes, the more kind of a rocky road you might encounter with these people. And they heckle and they want to be part of the show. Some of them want to be the show. And so that's been since the dawn of time. Comedians have had to deal with that. But now they show up wanting to protest and wanting to tell you that something you said is completely unacceptable. And so, now you have to deal with that in the middle of your set. And nothing brings a show or an audience to a screeching halt than someone in the back of the room screaming out some political view that they have that you might not share. People want to come to a comedy club to get away from that.
Yeah.
And now in the current climate, people are just, I used to have to be worried about born again Christians being offended by stuff that I did. Now I have to worry about 20-year-olds. It's the pendulum has swung so far now that these kids come out to these shows and they just everything triggers them, and it's unfortunate.
And Tom, what's interesting as you're saying that, I'm thinking back to, well, quite a few things. And I definitely can understand, especially on the corporate side, where it's, you can't, as an employee, you can't say anything anymore. So I assume as a comedian coming to a corporate gig, same thing. But what I thought was interesting was with the No Apologies tour, and I'm going to come back to that name in just a second, the show at the Keswick, number one, Jim Florentine, who we've had on our show before, got canceled earlier this year, along with 3 other comics in Seattle for whatever reason. People thought they were going to be offended, so they canceled them. But I also remember Tammy came out and opened the show at the Keswick and basically opened by saying, you're going to hear things tonight that may offend you, and I just want you to know there's an exit over there, there's an exit over there. And I just remember there was kind of a roar from that crowd saying it was going to be okay to just have fun. So my question is, what's it been like having the chance to, go around and tour with Jim and with Tammy? And how did that name come about, the No Apologies tour? Because I thought it was perfect.
Yeah, the promoter came to us with that name, and we all thought that's spectacular. Any chance you have to share the stage with Tammy Pescatelli and Jim Florentine, you leap at. I was a fan of theirs before I got on the show with them. And I think we all really gel backstage and on stage. We're all different in our way. Yes, we're 3 white guys or 1 girl, but I think we're so diverse in our backgrounds and our styles that it really works well for us. And we loved the concept because all 3 of us had to deal with that. Your point on Jim Florentine is well taken. The other people who got canceled from that same Seattle venue are friends of mine as well. And why? It's caveat emptor. Why did you buy them only to cancel them later because they might say something that might offend some of your clientele? I just don't understand the thought process that went into that. But I'll say this, Jim and the others who were canceled got a lot of press out of it. So it ended up working out in their favor, and they didn't have to take a 6-hour flight to Seattle to get all that publicity. So it worked out okay, but that's what we're dealing with now. And so, yeah, I love it when no matter which of we alternate different venues at the Keswick. I don't even remember where I was on the show, but whoever goes out first tries to lay down the rule. Look, it's called No Apologies. We're not going to apologize. You caveat emptor. You know what you're getting into. You bought the ticket. Just sit back, relax, have fun like it used to be. And that's kind of where we are. And people see the title of the show and they come knowing that no one's going to apologize. They don't have to deal with that. And we love that concept. And again, it's just such an honor to share the stage with those 2 behemoths in the comedy world. So it's just been a joy from Jump Street on that whole tour.
Well, yeah, there's still some shows left, right, on the tour?
Yeah, we have 3 more coming up. We have Newport, Rhode Island, and then we have Nashua, New Hampshire, and then we have another venue in New Hampshire, Plymouth, New Hampshire, where my wife went to college. Plymouth State College is in that same town. So, yeah, it's fun to get up there. And I'm a New England guy originally, so I love going back to those venues. So that'll be a lot of fun. And again, just being able to hang out with them. We're only on stage for an hour and a half. The other 23 hours of the day, you don't want to be with people you don't like. I've been in that situation before, and I'm sure I've been the people that people don't like in other situations. But Tammy and Jim and I get along very well, and so it's really a joy to be out there because we go out on the road all the time and we're alone. It's kind of lonely when you're in a Motel 6 in Dubuque, Iowa. But if you have other friends with you, that's why I bring my own opener sometimes when I go on the road, so I at least have someone to hang out with the other 23 hours of the day that I'm not on stage.
Well, you mentioned that your wife was from New Hampshire, so you've segued into my next question, which is where did the 2 of you meet? And what is it like in the Cotter household with 2 comedians?
Well, the first part of that is we are an HR violation. It was a workplace romance. We met at comedy clubs in Boston. We're both Boston comedians originally, and so we both met there. And she was very popular. She was an attractive young lady, and so all the comics were hitting on her all the time. And she had promised herself she would never date another comedian. And then I had promised myself I would never date a comedian or a waitress or a manager because that's what we all do. But we just ended up working at a gig in New Hampshire and in a town called Bartlett or North Conway, the same town. And my parents had a ski place up there. And so we went up to do the gig. And I said, hey, I'm going to spend a couple days skiing at this gig that we're doing. And if you want to come along, you can. And she said yes. And the rest is history. We've been together 23 years of marriage and together almost 30 years. And she puts up with me, which is she should get the Nobel Peace Prize. And it's wonderful. And she's very funny. And if your viewers don't know her, it's Carrie Louise. And she has a special on Showtime called Women of a Certain Age. And you can catch her. She's all over social media, pretty easy to find.
Do you bounce jokes off of each other?
She bounces frying pans off of me, but yes, we do that sometimes. Again, our styles are not that similar. She's a storyteller, and I'm a one-liner guy, and so people get nostalgic for comedy teams of the olden days. Burns and Allen, George Burns and Gracie Allen, Nichols and May was a big one. Lucy and Desi. So people want that, and so we get hired to work together sometimes, and that's trickier than people might think because, again, her style and my style are radically different. So to meld those together is another challenging puzzle, but we end up doing it and we love working with each other and it's fun. And so, yeah, people think we just laugh at everything. Our house is just complete laughter. And it's not, we're just like every other married couple out there, but we have 3 boys and they are hysterical. They make me laugh more than any other comedian. Don't tell them I said that because I don't want them to get cocky, but they're very funny. And so we just have a great time together and they'll bounce jokes off of us because all 3 of them say they want to try stand up at some point. One of them did. We did parents weekend at University of Rhode Island where my twins are seniors this year. And my son, Harry, opened up for my wife when we did parents weekend there and he did very well. He did 10 minutes of stand up and my other 2 sons say they're going to do it. So they're doomed to a life of poverty also.
Oh, so Tom, I'm curious though, as a dad, as you raising your sons, did you ever leverage comedy in your role as a dad and was it effective?
Yeah, we try to diffuse things with humor whenever we can, but sometimes it's not appropriate. Sometimes you have to bring the hammer down. We never yell at our kids. We prefer more of a creepy whisper from under their bed at 3 a.m. Very effective. And we never hit our kids ever. We choke them, and they always tap. These are jokes, everybody. Please don't report me. My dad was again a neurosurgeon. He was kind of an old military guy and very straight laced. But even he had a good sense of humor. And I remember in high school. As a quick example, I was on the wrestling team. When you're my height, you would ride a horse or you wrestle. And there were no horses, so I was a wrestler. And a lot of the guys on my wrestling team were getting mohawk haircuts. I don't know if you remember those, but it's just that strip of hair down the side and bald. I'm down the middle and bald on the sides. And so I said to my dad, hey, a lot of the guys, the upperclassmen on the wrestling team are getting mohawk haircuts. I would like to get a mohawk haircut. And my father said, I think that's a great idea. And then he regaled me with the history of the Mohawk Indians and what great warriors they were. And at the end, he said, my only concern is where you're going to live until the hair grows back, because it will not be under this roof. And that was his way of saying, there's not a shot in hell I'm letting you get a mohawk, but I'll entertain the thought for a moment. And I got the message loud and clear. And so that was just, another example of my dad diffusing kind of an awkward situation with humor. And I wasn't bitter about not being able to get the mohawk. I'm glad I didn't get it in retrospect because I'm losing my hair now. Why did I want to shave it then? But I thought my dad taught me a great lesson then that, you can get your point across with a smile and with humor and not, be the downer dad, which he wasn't.
And a history lesson.
And a history lesson. I learned a lot about the Mohawks. I had no idea they sided with the French during the Revolution, and how great. And they were from right where I live in New York. They're upstate New York. They're not far from here.
And that's where you're living now, right?
Yes.
Okay. Last question, Tom, because the time goes by so fast. What are you most proud of?
This will sound so trite, but we just moved our twins in for their senior year of college at University of Rhode Island yesterday, and so the fact that two comedians could raise the three young men that we have, so far not incarcerated. My youngest is a senior in high school, and he'll be going off to college next year. And more importantly, we had family events leading up to this past weekend, and just to seeing just watching my children interact with their aunts and uncles and grandparents and everybody else, and I'm thrilled to death with the young men that they've become. So yeah, I love being on AGT. That was great. The Tonight Show. There are great things in my career that I look back at that I think is great. My most recent special, Rapid Fire, you were kind enough to mention. But career is okay. Life is life. And in my life, to be able to, find the woman of your dreams, be married 23 years, but together 33 decades is a long time. And to raise the three young men that I have, that we have. My wife is very instrumental, arguably more instrumental with my son, because I was on the road so often. But they really are great guys, and I'm most proud of them. Don't let them know that. They're cocky enough.
Yeah. Well, we'll never tell, and maybe we'll cut this part of this. No, we won't. We won't cut this part out. But Tom, before Rosie closes us out, I just wanted to say thank you for all the laughs, all the joy that you've brought for so long, and it was such a pleasure getting to know you even more than we did. We talked after the show for a little bit in Keswick that night in July, but it's been such a pleasure having you, and I really do appreciate every single one of those jokes that you've shared, and just making life a little lighter and a little happier for all the time that you have. Thank you.
Honored. And thank you for having me on this great podcast. I had been warned earlier by both Tammy and Jim that I would have a great time on here, and they were true to their word again. This is great. I do a bunch of these, and you guys are wonderful, and this was really nice. And thank you for having me on.
Well, we appreciate that, and we love your comedy. We'll definitely be back to see you again, and hopefully, Tammy and Jim will be there as well. But thank you for coming on the show with us. And folks, again, we wouldn't be able to do this without you. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
The Wiener Dog. Have you seen the dachshund? Tell me God doesn't have a sense of humor. Have you seen this design flaw? The leg is this long. That other male appendage is this long. Which sounds great if you're a guy, until you see him walk. Want to go outside? No, I'd like a jock strap. That's what I'd like. I would like you to put in a handicap ramp, because stairs are painful for me. I'm not a dog, I'm a plow. Help me. When I run down the street, sparks fly off the back of me. Do the math. No wonder they're so nasty. You'd be nasty too if you were dragging your equipment all over town. That's not a problem for me. Irish. Okay, now. It's all right, I got a big liver. Anyway. Who has a little yippy dog? Anybody have a small dog? Anybody in this crowd? 1,200 people? Nobody has one? You were gonna say yes. What do you have? A Pomeranian? What's the Pomeranian's name? Lily Ann Victoria May. Sometimes the comedy just writes itself, doesn't it? Right? 4 names for your dog. And when the dog goes outside, you literally go outside and go, Lily Ann Victoria May, come here. That is weird. How many pounds is Lily Ann Victoria May? 10. 10 pounds of fury. Can I call her Lily? Is that all right? Yeah. We're on a first name basis now, me and your little Pomeranian. Is Lily a guard dog? Bullshit. Here's a quick impression of me breaking in your house. Hi, Lily. Where's the jewelry? I kid. No one would stomp on Lily Ann Victoria May. Just trying to make a point. Lovable, but useless, really. Can we be honest about this? Seriously?
Lily Ann Victoria May will never pull a dog sled. Can we agree on that? And she can't sniff out drugs at the airport because she already looks like she's jacked up on cocaine, right? Because they shiver for no goddamn reason in July. And you can't take Lily hunting unless you want the deer to die of laughter, right? That's not gonna work. Lovable. Who has a real dog? Anybody have a real dog? Anybody? What do you have right there? What do you have? A German Shepherd Husky Mist. Now, that's a big badass dog. What's that dog's name? AJ. 2 letters.
This week's episode has been brought to you by Doherty & Company Insurance Services for all your business and personal insurance needs. Our friends at Tennis Addiction in Exton, PA. And the Malin Agency, where exceeding expectations is how they do business.